Hoeveel? Nachten. Quarantaine. Smachten. Tot. De wereld ontwaakt.
Just heard was a sampled version of Annelies van Parijs' third haiku, radically edited for the project we will show, at least part of it, a bit later. A quick round of introduction, perhaps. I'm Lies Colman, pianist, performer, and mostly quite harmless. Next to me is Els Mondelaers, mezzo-soprano, multimedia performer, and all-round drama queen. We have Annelies van Parijs, composer, and the master brain who actually manages to make us all sound coherently, at least in the end. And Gaea Schoeters, author, librettist, and professional nonconformist. Today, we will be addressing a research project which has kept us entertained during the lockdown, after a few years of preliminary investigations, trial, and error. We will be rethinking the GESAMTKUNSTWERK and try to create new dramaturgical codes. An increasingly recurring question that keeps confronting artists with their professional core is that on the public relevance of arts. Classical music might be one of the most targeted disciplines in this question for justification. Musicians, organizations, and higher education institutions are accused of being out of touch with reality and out of touch with the expectation of the audience. Notwithstanding the issue whether art and classical music are relevant, valuable, necessary, or totally outdated or redundant, the fact is that one of the necessary traits of the arts in general, in order to safeguard and validate its existence, is to keep questioning and reinventing itself. One of the obvious ways to embark on such an expedition is to question the premises, modi operandi, and institutionalized artistic forms that dominate our current practices, and to examine whether they are enabling or, on the contrary, limiting and even prohibiting innovation and creativity. When 3 years ago the Royal Conservatoire and the Royal Academy of Fine Arts initiated a search on how can we create a contemporary, valuable, and inclusive Gesamtkunstwerk within our institution, we found that there might be a few more hurdles than we initially anticipated. It even started with the question itself and the problematic nature of the utopia of the Gesamtkunstwerk and the love-hate relationship we seem to have with that. Let's first take a furtive look at this construct in order to indicate some of its inherent inconsistencies. Although Wagner actually only used the term about 3 times in his writings, the idea of the Gesamtkunstwerk is undeniably his. A Gesamtkunstwerk, as he formulated it, was the summum of artistic creation, a combination of all art forms whose combination culminates in a magnum opus for the stage, an architectural, dramatic, visual, and musical masterpiece. Art, in Wagner's vision, had not only an artistic function. He despised the low arts, the common entertainment for the masses, and wanted to facilitate the art forms to rise above it. Hence, among others, the great emphasis on the architectural surroundings in which the stage work actually had to take place. From another angle, Wagner did not care for the moral function attributed to high art either. Art should not be held responsible, in his view, to educate and emancipate humans into high moral beings. Instead, he emphasized the empirical value of the arts, the sensory experience, the direct perceivability of art as a true representation of reality, of nature. Art should unite people with each other, people with reality, and with nature. Art should hold a mirror and be a guide. In other words, art did also have a social function. The GESAMTKUNSTWERK as the tree that holds all art forms as its branches, according to GESLINK, is the elaboration, the externalization of this. And as he named it, it had to be the artwork of the future, das Kunstwerk des Zukunft. His definition of the GESAMTKUNSTWERK was the following: a work of art for the stage based on the ideal of ancient Greek tragedy to which all the individual arts would contribute under the direction of a single creative mind in order to express one overriding idea. At once, we can see that this holds an inherent insustainability. The direction of a single creative mind excludes individual emancipation of the other artists. The ideal of the composer does all, or sometimes it's not a composer, but the director, the librettist, at least the creative mastermind. That undermines the social idea from within, to equalize all, and by doing so, giving up individual ego to the benefit of the whole only goes as far as the one in charge. The combination of art forms does not automatically create room and possibility to reach monodisciplinary summa either. Music is literally condemned to the pit. Drama is a means to explicit content, and visual and architectural elements are employed instrumentally. However craftful each element might be, the one overriding idea prohibits freedom of creation. And finally, by withdrawing the work or the world of art from everyday social life, it is no longer representative of reality nor embedded in the real life of everyday citizens, but rather a caricature. The genre, however, continues to trigger the imagination, and the combination of art forms as a means to inspire and reinforce each other, to learn from and to challenge each other and create something new, unexpected, out of the box, still triggers artists who are not willing to be confined to the boundaries of their own discipline or specialization. Music theater, the genre that actually cannot be called a genre by definition, is situated at the same environment as opera, as Gesamtkunstwerken, in the sense that it regards art disciplines as complementary or supplementary. As GESLINK puts it, the definition of music theater at first seems to be grounded in negation. It is not opera, it is not music, it is not theater. It is a genre that constantly challenges itself by holding as its core the constant renewal and innovation. It is a perpetual building site, but by constantly remodeling and reinventing, it is not easy to find a modus operandi that can be extrapolated from one project to the next. Here too, we see certain struggles that undermine the practice from within. Although by strict definition we are searching for a new form of the Gesamtkunstwerk in the sense that we search for a new way to gesamtlich create and perform a Kunstwerk, but not under the Wagnerian definition, we want to intensify and embed intensive collaboration, departing from our own strengths but leaving aside the premises we mentioned before. However, even with our divergent philosophy and modus operandi, it is not as easy as it seems to break loose from the structure which is imprinted on our practical knowledge on creating together. Although collaboration is a cornerstone of the process and emancipation and even expansion of disciplinary practices are the premises, in reality, it seems to be a venture with many traps. When we work as individuals in a collaborative context, there are many voices to be heard. But even when attributing value to each line, this polyphonic process might not sound very harmoniously when these lines are not completely in sync.
And then she looks at me. I have no idea why. In any case, it's a fact, as Lies said, that music theatre and performances which are related to music theatre do tend to suffer a bit from the fact that there is not really a clear protocol or a clear modus operandi in which these things could be made in a collaborative context. Because, and that's where the catch is, it's clearly an interdisciplinary creation, an interdisciplinary product, but there is no way to get there together. And this unclear process very often results also in an unclear dramaturgical code, which then for an audience becomes very difficult to follow. And one of the problems, or one of the reasons for this returning problem, is that the procedure is very often consecutive. It starts with a libretto, which is passed on to a composer, which is then given to the performers, and then there's a director or a stage director who does something with it, and then finally it reaches the audience, who then have not really an idea at what precisely they're looking at, because very often all these different codes don't really talk to each other. So the GESAMTKUNSTWERK, that was the original idea, turns out to be some sort of Frankenstein's monster, which is sewed together from all these different disciplines, but doesn't really come to life. And for that reason, very often audiences perceive this kind of music theatre as difficult because they don't find a way to connect. But what we want to explore is if this difficulty to connect to this art form is actually caused by the way that it is made. And of course, everyone is looking for solutions, and very often these solutions consist out of excluding the narrative. Either we use fantasy language, which makes it easier for the audience. There is nothing to understand, so they can just focus on the music. Or, as Lies already said, there is this sort of director does all or composer does all, where one person tries to bring the story together. Or the librettist is excluded because we adapt stories or pieces which already exist, which also make it easier to understand these things. But none of these new methods is actually looking at a new method of co-creation, a way to bring these things together from the very beginning of the process, and trying to, with all these different disciplines, create one clear narrative in a democratical way, because that's the other thing very often, and that's because we inherited the working procedures of opera, where librettist and composer are very often conveniently dead. There is no democratic process because the dead don't want to be part of this co-creation. Since we are all alive, we thought it would be nice to sort of do it together from the start, and to also include performers in this process from the very beginning. Because we thought, as they are part of the compository process, and we all make this story together, starting from the building stones of the narrative, and therewith creating a musical language which will then become a composition, and which in the end will become a staged performance. This might be sort of a bonus for what we would then call a better functioning interdisciplinary interplay, and give more coherence to the story in the end. I think that's sort of what I wanted to say about it. The only other thing I would like to add is this, of course, also brings a collaborative responsibility for the end product, where we all together really form part of this from the beginning till the very end. So this production which we make now will result in various forms, which are all the product of the four of us and the co-creation product that we initiated here.
When we talk about reinventing a genre, of course we have to set ourselves goals. Our specific goal in this artistic and research project was to search for a new process of co-creation that aims for added value by combining the strengths of all our disciplines, challenging them individually and reinforcing them collectively in order to eliminate the aforementioned artistic and creative loss of the traditional MO of the Wagnerian prototype, and respecting and even enhancing disciplinary bound specific expertise. What process of co-creation could we employ, and what are the consequences for the traditional processes of a creative artist and that of a performing artist?
And there we have to have a look at how this specific piece, which is called Holle Haven and is part of a larger project called BESMETTE STAD, actually came into life. And it all started with a commission which came from outside, where I was asked as a writer to rewrite Paul van Ostaijen's Holle Haven poem, which is part of the clear Flemish literature canon, into a new project in a corona or COVID context. So Bezette Stad was transformed into Besmette Stad, which was already a first dialogue with an existing piece and also a morphing of this piece into a new context. And we sort of started from this. I rewrote the text, trying to keep as much as possible of the original poem in it, and adding new corona or COVID-related new text in between. And since this procedure of using, reusing, sampling, intertextuality, using old texts and giving them new forms was already in the core of this project, we actually found it logical to also do a similar thing in the musical language. So at a certain point in the text, there are two small haikus which I wrote in, which originally in Van Ostaijen's text were sort of commercial beer brands. These beer brands became haikus, and Annelies van Parys took two haikus which she already had written and which we sort of radically changed into new haikus which are now used into the new piece. And maybe it's interesting to have a look at the morphing of this haiku from its original form to the new form.
Kan het drinken van sloten alcohol vervangen.
Yes, and one of the other things that should be said about it is that we made this piece during the first quarantine, or that we started to make this piece during the first quarantine, which means that the corona context in which we made it sort of forced us to make it in a digital way. And of course it's strange if you make a co-creation that you make it while you're locked up in separate boxes. But in spite of that, maybe composer Annelies van Parys can give us a bit of an idea of how the process actually worked.
Well, actually, normally the idea was indeed to have more real-life improvisation sessions and so on. But yeah, as we were all locked up apart, far from each other, we started with this text, because initially it was also the idea that also the text would kind of grow out of these sessions. So, but then we started from this text, and each of us had like some ideas with some words or some associations. And first some material was sent to me, because being a composer I was supposed to be the one constructing and arranging the material. So then I received some first ideas and tried to work them out. And then we went back and forth, so it was like a very basic recordings with iPhones or whatever, and then I worked on these. I wrote them down, I changed it a little bit or had some suggestions, and then they came back with new ideas. And so we had like this ping-ponging of ideas. And then out of this first quarantine, there was the first, I think, 5 minutes of music. And then we started to make an audio track out of this to see how it really sounded, because we couldn't really rehearse together. And as it worked very well, we decided to go on in this process and to continue like this by going back and forth with ideas. More?
Yes, so as well as from the artistic as from a research perspective, we were all collaborating in the entire practice. And so it's mainly practitioner research we performed. But the main thing here is that everything we did sort of together, but from within our own disciplines. But the funny thing sometimes we didn't stay in our own disciplines. So this way of working certainly had an impact on all of us. The process, the expectation, and the outcome. So Els and I, the more performing artists, we provided the material through guided improvisations by Annelies and free associations. It might be verbal, it might have been musical, so we recorded little things. Sometimes it had been a very long time since my piano was tuned and revised, so my pedal was very squeaky, so even in the score now we have squeaks and thumps from my pedal. And it was a recurring process each time that we were building on the new or processed material by Annelies. And another challenging thing is that the creative artists are also on stage now. And sometimes that also gives unexpected results.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, in fact, I have not much to add on what you all already said. For me, it was fun to be normally as a singer, and the classical way, you're the latest one who is involved, getting the score, have to study it in the classical way. And I think in music theater there's a lot more going on already. And but it was fun that, for example, like Gaea was just explaining, like how did she build up her text, and that you are really, you know, brought into this world of her brains and how that she constructed, where is it going through, what is the part, and for as a performer that's so helpful. And a lot of times they don't give you this information, so that was already cool. And then we started to talk, and we'd have these chats about ideas and stuff. And yeah, we also made some jokes, like there was suddenly this Latin, and that you said, what do I have to do with this? And I said, yeah, but you remember, Annelies, you wrote this poema for me, and it was Greek, but maybe it's in the same atmosphere. And then in her score, I discovered, hey, yeah, she made a small quote. And so this is all these cool things that happen then. And normally, it's much more alive for me when I received now the score. And like with Paul van Ostaijen, we made this link like, hey, but he did a lot with jazz music. Oh, maybe we can do that. And I tried some chords, and then I get a version of Annelies, what is naturally enriched. But my small idea is there, and that's so charming in a way. And also, and the material. I think last rehearsal, we were listening to the samples you sent to Annelies. And then, yeah, it was incredible how, for me, I have to say, like, in this music theater world, and they ask these questions about, but the score and this and stuff, and why shouldn't we do it like that, with more improvisation and stuff. But now I realized with this project, the skills of people who make the text and what they're building up, and also the skills like of a composer that you know, it's 30 minutes, but how do you put it in this line? And all these loose fragments of ideas and stuff that happens, suddenly you have this consistent material that is working. And so for me, that was like, aha, that is the skill of a composer, and aha, that is the skill of a writer. And so from another perspective, I got this appreciation again. So yeah, it was very interesting for me in both ways.
Mm-hmm. And I think some of the creative artists also gained appreciation for performing artists.
It's so much fun to be with the makers on stage, because now they suffer too. And that's really cool, because a lot of times they're in the chair watching you, and you're suffering on stage and doing all this thing they ask, and it's so difficult from time to time. And then they come with this remark like, yes, but could you sing this note there a bit more like that? And you think, what is he or she busy with? And now we have these persons on stage with us also suffering. And that is so
refreshing.
Nice.
Yes, I love it. I love it. So voila, Lies, back to you.
Okay, actually, this project is not yet finished. What you will see and hear now is only the auditory side of our story, and we have found more artistic partners to join us and our co-creative process. We have Sebastiaan van Mallegem, who has created a video, and Luigi De Angelis, who has made a mise en scène. And eventually we will have 3 or even more possible performance forms, going from a video clip to an installation/live performance with the images to a complete movie. And of course, we have the musical performance an sich. We don't consider this the end stage of our research either. So the next step would be to investigate the alignment of the individual sets of practices and methods that are inherent to each of our collaborative art forms in a project, to participatively and inductively searching for the answers on what and how and why we do artistic actions. How do we provide meanings, and what are the implications that these make? We want to explicit the emergent parameters and processes and connect these to mutual expectations we have in terms of methods, practices, and outcomes. The goal of such a larger scale investigation could be the design of a model for collaboration between creative and performing artists, a tool to reconcile disciplinary métier with interdisciplinary reality. But now, perhaps without further ado, we would like to share the first part of our in total 40-minute creation, Holle Haven 2020, from the revisited collection BESMETTE STAD, based on Paul van Ostaijen's Bezette Stad.
Verborgen geborgen, kans op een kus, gestolen zonder getuigen.
Altijd dezelfde tijd.
Een enkele fietser fietst door lege straten, nergens heen. Stilstand. Anders zelfs 's nachts dagdruk, nu ook overdag nacht leeg, uitgestorven.
Het in enkel echoeren.
Tweegesprek met mezelf, zonder jou.
Dat doelloze
liggen van nachtlege straten, de dagen verwachten.
Immer dat stappen van de ene mens.
Alweer een sirene. Kamer die steeds kleiner wordt. Quarantaine kwijnen.
Verlaten.
Straten. Spookstad stilte. Een vastgelopen machine.
Plotseling.
Gestopt in haar vaart.
Plotseling.
Twee geliefden in elkaars armen, omgekomen van verveling of slachtoffer van huiselijk geweld. Getuige, de bebloede steelpan in zijn hand. 2020. Viginti, viginti. Alles nog onaangeraakt, onbetreden plaatsdelict. De offshorebedrijven, de belastingontduikers, de zwendelaars, de klimaatontkenners, de vervuilers die niet betaalden, de populisten, de beursbellenblazers, de consumenten, de marketeers, de regenwoudkappers, de pechvogels, de 1%. A fossilized smartphone preserved behind glass. Een wereldattractie uit het Anthropoceen. For the new young to traipse past on school trips. Yawning. Maquette van een mislukt maatschappijmodel. We moeten... Laat ons de politiekers buiten smijten.
Je hebt niet meer de lyrische dynamiek
Tot elke prijs wilden we je behouden, zo verslingerd waren we aan het veelkoppige monster dat ons verslond.
die geboren in een
Consumptiemaatschappij.
willen slechts sterven aldaar, zegt men.
De fotograaf Gursky maakte fortuin met het vastleggen van je perverse schoonheid. Jij immer doordraaiende, dolgedraaide machine. Jij snoeiharde beat op repeat. Van je hebzucht. Steeds weer versterkt. Zucht naar meer. En meer. En meer. En daarvan nog meer. Duizendvoudige... Van willen en willen hebben. Krijgen is de kunst. Shells sell seashells by the seashore. The shells shall stockpiles offshore, I'm sure. So if Shell sells seashells on the seashore, then I'm sure Shell stockpiles shell stocks and shares offshore. Doordraaien, immer die dreunende beat op repeat. Hakken, 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 hebben, 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 houden, 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 meer, meer, meer. Immer binnenstromende winst. Een verliesleidende wereld, net buiten beeld.
Schuine wielen.
Dood kind. Handelstromen in en uit, immer binnenstromende winst.
Heeft
Bortinski,
juist gezien,
dat prachtig beeld lijkt wel een boom. Subtiele schoonheid, wonderlijk kleurpalet.
de coloristische precieze overgaan.
Naar bergen vermalen microchips, nikkelrode waterlopen. Fosforescerende vijvers, alomvattend van petrochemische geuren en verschroeid rubber, eindeloze stroken verschroeide aarde, eindelijk plant klaar. Het lijkt wel de Matrix, alleen is het waar. Boem, paukenslag, daar botst ethiek met esthetiek.
Olienoten,
Palmolie,
smeerolie,
meerolie. Altijd weer meer olie.
ons nationaal product, ons koloniaal product.
Concessies vervangen vlaggen boven windgewesten. Logo, NGO. Niet ingelijfd, maar opgekocht. De nieuwe staatsvorm is de multinational. Kobalt voor onze smartphone, ananas voor onze krok Hawaii en bushmeat voor de anderen. Wuhan, Bergamo, Yokohama, New York, de blitse aanbiedingsfolders.
De Engelse woorden en het Engels accent.
Van de bucketlisters. Leeg hoofd, lege agenda. Een jaar waarin alles kan en niets moet. Vervulling van een oude droom. Uitstappen. Geen vakantie is geen optie, vond Thomas Cook. Dus trok hij in 1840 de trein in beweging. Georganiseerde
Bortinski heeft een Thomas Cook citytrip geboekt.
inpakken en wegwezen. Geen vakantie, maar reizen. Op oude wijze. Bildungsreizen. Niet ter vermaak, maar voor onze allerindividueelste...
Thomas Cook is de beste.
Groepsreizen tegen democratische prijzen. Een wapen in de klassenstrijd. Ontsluiting van de Alpen. Iedereen
Iedereen een Thomas Cook citytrip.
ontwikkeling. En uit nieuwsgierigheid. De wereld zien. Low impact, high quality. Traag reizen. Vertragen. Terug naar de bron. Naar zee. Wat later, net voor Wereldoorlog 2, kreeg zowat iedereen congé payé. Die gaandeweg steeds de natuur en onszelf. Een ander tempo van leven. Waarin tijd wordt gemeten aan de intensiteit van het moment of het gesprek. langer werden. Het moest ook steeds verder, vaker en goedkoper. Koste wat kost. Een immer doordraaiende, dolgedraaide machine. Last minutes en low-cost vluchten.
Hane met citytrippen.
En niet staccato verstrijkt volgens het tikken van de klok, die ons voortstuwt, genadeloos, steeds sneller en sneller, steeds zoeken.
Circulez.
Iedereen intercontinentaal, resorts en cruiseschepen, volgestouwd met rood verbrande schouders, onwillige...
Wat wij willen is ons recht.
Naar minder, niet meer, naar iets anders. Omarmen wat vreemd is en niet zoals thuis. De weidsheid van bergen, het gebrek aan bierbuiken vullen veel te nauwe straten met de geur van zonnecrème. De oude wereld kreunt onder de druk van comfort. Een openheid, leegte, gevuld met niets anders dan vrijheid. Elke dag aanschuren tegen de grenzen. Het najagen van...
Bananas, atque, Panama.
Het massatoerisme dat alles genadeloos opeet, platloopt en upgrade. Overal cola en overal hipsters, overal meer.
First class with our modern comfort.
Een verlangen dat bonst in je bloed en je voortjaagt, steeds verder van huis, de einder en de ander tegemoet. Ginds heen, naar meer van hetzelfde. Voor wie het geluk en het geld heeft, blijft geen grens gesloten, geen piek onbereikt. 4G op de Everest.
Music, dancing.
Waar het onbekende lonkt, om daar te ontdekken dat wat echt telt niet anders is dan thuis. In wezen zijn wij alle gelijk. Geluk, genot, genoeg.
Girls, girls, girls.
Instant Instagram. In Thailand krijg je 2 kleine meisjes gratis bij je tweede cocktail. Frequent flyer korting. A happy ending. Wereldleiders.
Goodbye, vallen, vaten, vrijheid. Dit heeft
Bortinski.
vastgehouden en gegeven een
Fotografische.
gelijkwaarde die oproept de sensatie van
Jouw geur. Ochtendvocht verdampt. Stijgt op. Pheromonen.
die snijden dwars door alle zinnen. Ik heb gezien hoe
In
de volle haven
onze lichamen.
bewogen in alle richtingen en sprongen slag van het havenhart.
Lege armen.
Magische
tot gemis gespiegeld verlangen.
Heel de volheid waant. Staan slapen, slapen.